Hi, welcome to a special edition of Education Matters, where we meet some of the state leaders. With us today is Senate President Steve Sweeney. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ray.
Our pleasure. Well, you've been Senate President for quite a while now. We have some new faces coming on the scene in Trenton. We have a new governor and we have a new Speaker of the Assembly. How do you envision your relationship with them working for the people of New Jersey?
I envision us having a good working relationship. I tell people, Ray, we agree on most of the issues, but we all have our own opinions how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think we'll get a lot done.
Okay. Probably the first issue that's going to face not just the Senate, but the governor and the Speaker is the state budget. That's where a lot of decisions are going to have to be made. With that, there's some proposals being floated out there from various to increase revenue either through a millionaire's tax, legalizing marijuana. How do you see this unfolding?
Well, Ray, I was very much in favor of millionaire's tax for the last 8 years, and what just recently happened in Washington, D.C. has caused me to hit the pause button.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm really concerned about the loss of wealth in the state if we go forward with it. So I've assembled a group of economists and tax experts to really study how we do everything in New Jersey. Not just how we raise money, but how do we spend money, and do we look at doing government differently? I've talked about, is it time to have the conversation about countywide school districts? Or is it time to have the conversation to eliminate the K-6, the K-8, and have just K-12? These discussions have been around for a long time. And it's now time that we look at the dollars that we're raising in taxes already, and are we spending them as efficiently as we possibly can? It's a big question. But I have a panel of people that understand policy and the economy, and we're going to work on all that. Legalization of marijuana is something that I do support. But even that wouldn't be a benefit to the budget until at least the following budget, mm-hmm. at the earliest. So, we have some work on our hands, but so like I said, the budget's going to be a challenge. It always is. It has been since I've been here. I've been here for 4 terms now. So, it is always a challenge.
It's always the first challenge, too, particularly for the governor. I have to go back to a question on regionalization and consolidation. Yeah. I know you're going to bring that up, but I will follow that up. You're just taking a look at that to see if that's a way to be more efficient. The commission that you're looking at is whether that is a possible solution.
It is something we have to look at. It's not anything. There's no in-stone solution. But I know Maryland not too long ago switched mm-hmm. from local districts to county districts, and they're always in the top 10 in education, and they're spending a lot less. Mm-hmm. Ray, so I'm a big believer in regionalized services. I did it in Gloucester County as the freeholder director. When I left in 2010, we were saving $30 million a year for taxpayers in Gloucester County alone. And that was all low-hanging fruit. We could do a lot more. It's just willingness to look at things differently. We're at a point now where average property tax is $8,500. Mm-hmm. And we don't want bigger class sizes. We want technology in our schools. We want the kids to have the best of everything, because at the end of the day, an educated workforce drives your economy. But it doesn't mean it has to be the way we're doing it now.
All right, let's talk about the budget a little bit more. One of the biggest chunks out of it, and then the one that grows probably the largest each year, is our obligations for our pension and health benefits. I know you were a supporter of the reforms we did in 2011. Do we need to look at more reforms? How do you see that unfolding? Because that's going to be a difficult situation.
Well, right. That's going to continue to consume the growth. And we do grow every year. Mm-hmm. In fact, when we got here, they weren't putting any money in the pension. Now we're up to $2.5 billion. It's going to go to $3 billion next year. But if there wasn't a period where the government skipped the payments, our payment would only be $1 billion. We'd be fine. But unfortunately, it's $3 billion on the way to close to $6 billion. So those conversations are going to have to be had at some point. Governor Murphy, I have confidence that, as someone as astute as he is, when it comes to pensions and finances, that's really one of his strengths. And I'm anxious to see where he's going to go with it and what he's going to do. Look, the pension changes that we did, we legislated them. We didn't sit down and talk to people because we had to. People just talked beyond it and ignored the problems that existed. But if we didn't do the changes in 2011, the pension system for some of the unions, like teachers, would be broke now. So, people say pensions can't go broke. They can, and they do.
So, while some people oppose some of those reforms, it probably saved money and pensions down the road.
Yeah, people are always going to oppose tough decisions, and no one wants to go tell their members, look, we have a problem. But we're at a point where the taxpayers can't pay anymore. We really are at $8,500. And with what they just did in Washington with President Trump's tax cut, which is a tax increase for a lot of New Jerseyans, we don't have a lot of options and places to go. So trying to find ways to do it differently, to make it work better and be more efficient is something we're going to really focus on. Other parts of the country have county-based government, county-based schools, and it's a lot cheaper. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer. But what I'm saying is we're going to look at everything because it's time to have a real honest to eye-to-eye conversation with the people of the state. And if this is what you really want, if I can, and this is how you want it, well, you're going to pay more for it. If I can provide you these services and give you better quality at a lower cost, would you be interested in it? And normally the answer is yes. We did it in Gloucester County with ambulance service. Our response times are less than 6 minutes when we were exceeding all the response times of everyone else. But it was getting over the fact, well, we don't know who the ambulance people are. I said, well, they're trained and they're certified, and that's the most important thing, that you have someone that knows what they're doing when they get there.
Looking at continuing on the state on the health benefits, one thing will you look at, like for local districts, the state health benefit premiums are going up significantly more than other sectors. They're going to 8.4 and I think 13% the last 2 years. Is that something that you might also like to take a look at?
Yeah,
too?
I would like the NJEA to come back and look at it because the other public sector unions sat down. We created labor management boards, or from my world, they're called Taft-Hartley, and they're equal number of people. Well, that labor management board was able to provide for non-teachers no increase last year, and I think it's a small decrease this year in healthcare premiums, while teachers saw their premiums go up 22% over 2 years. Mm-hmm. So, there's ways of doing things more cost-effectively and more efficiently. Look, I worked with the teachers' unions and with the public workforce to create a reverse auction, which was a process where we check on the cost of what we're paying for prescriptions. And we found out, what I knew was that we were being overcharged. We're going to save $1.5 billion over the next 3 years, which means the government will pay less, workers will pay less. We created patient-centered medical home care, primary care medical home centers, and that's where you go to the doctor and you don't pay a deductible. But the doctor's going to treat you more. It's not a fee for service. They're going to spend the half hour, like when I was a kid, my mom would take me to the doctor, where they manage your health care, and there's $200 million in savings there. It's not always about changing and taking things away. It's about trying to find ways to do them more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And I really congratulate a lot of the public sector unions because they were willing to make minor tweaks to their plan. And they saved their members from, again, it was 22%. I think it was roughly, the teachers had roughly, in 2 years, they had zero.
Yeah, well, we hope that we can bring everyone to the table on that issue too. Another big chunk out of the budget, obviously, is school funding. I know you've been a proponent. I was thinking about it today. We passed the SFRA 10 years ago, almost to the day that we're filming this. I know you want to start moving towards funding that formula because we had a pause on it and it made it inequities in your mind a little great.
Well, listen, the school funding, the school funding formula is something that was recognized nationally. It works, but it has to be funded. Mm-hmm. And when we passed it the first time, there was some things that we did, the legislature did, that was not in the formula. We put enrollment caps, and when we created adjustment aid for districts that we knew were going to lose aid, and we didn't want to see it happen overnight. We didn't want to hurt districts, so we didn't want to see anybody get hurt. Well, those enrollment caps and the adjustment aid were supposed to be temporary. They've been there for 9 years. I tell people all the time, I said, I'm not angry, but I'm annoyed that districts that knew they didn't have the kids, you know what I mean? They were getting extra funding. Like, I'm just using numbers. I'm getting funded for 2,000 kids, even though I only have 1,000. Why didn't you shrink your school district through attrition? Why didn't you prepare, for the day that was going to come? Because, it always does come. It's just when that someone says, hey, wait a minute, you're getting all this funding for kids that you don't have. The NJA loves saying that we don't want to take any money from any children. Neither do I. I want the money to go where the students are. My home county, Washington Township, was getting funded for 1,600 kids they didn't have. They're buying tablets for kids. That's wonderful. Elementary school kids, that's wonderful. But what about the districts like Kingsway, where kids are sharing books because they don't have enough books, because they got 1,000 kids that they actually have that are not getting any funding? When we delved into this and really dug into this, we found out that there was 18,500 kids that were, districts were getting, the top overfunded districts were getting funding for almost 18,000 kids roughly, that they didn't have the kids. They weren't there. And the underfunded districts have 12,500 kids that they're not getting any funding for that they have. So the school funding formula, if you remember, was meant the money to follow the child.
Right.
And we just want the money to start flowing to where the kids are. We don't want to, we have obligations like Patterson. I kicked off the tour when we started this conversation on education funding in Patterson. And I found out they teach in 58 different languages. Kids don't have books when they go home. So how do they do homework? Right? We're not giving children, we're not treating all children the same. And that was part of the School Funding Act. It's not about the zip code. It's about every child supposed to get a quality education.
Right.
And the systems broke. And last year, when we broke the impasse on school funding, we moved 30.4, maybe right around $30.4 million in August. And if you remember, everyone said, you can't do it that late. The school budget's been passed, and it's going to create havoc, and these schools are going to have problems. Not one school district cut a program, a teacher, anything. And they lost over $30 million. So, what I knew is that they're sitting on the money that, the kids aren't there. The money has to start moving. We can never, no matter how much they talk about tax this or tax that, if you don't address that hold harmless funding and move that hold harmless funding to the districts where the children are, we cannot fix the formula. When we're not going to just leave it alone. We're just not going to leave it there. So I know who I'm talking to right now. I'm telling everyone, be prepared, because, everyone said we couldn't do it before it was too late. Understand it's coming. And when we pass a state budget, we're going to have a program on how we're going to start moving that adjustment aid. Again, we moved $30 million, which was a small fraction. I think that, we don't want to hurt schools. It will probably take 4 to 5 years to move it all. But that means we're going to move a larger portion of that money to the districts where the children are. So I agree with the NJA, which is remarkable, where the money needs to be with the children. And that's where we're going to put it.
Just a little follow-up to that. So from your perspective, you wanted the original intent of the school funding formula to kind of phase in those transitions. Our association is concerned about those districts that will receive cuts too, and I think part of the problem is when it was cut at the last minute. Yeah. They may not have let anyone go, but they might not have hired people that they anticipated hiring. But so from your position, do you see it hopefully being decided a little bit earlier than it was last year?
Well, listen, we're going through the budget process. All I can tell you is I'm talking about it now, and districts should be prepared. They know that I'm focusing on this. And I understand the concern with the districts that are losing funding too. But Ray, they had a lot of funding for kids they didn't have for a long time. And, there's, some people would say a responsible board, knowing they didn't have the kids, would through attrition, shrink the size, build their surplus, because they were getting the money no matter what. Just size the school properly because you don't have the children. And then when Judgment Day comes, you're not going to be hurt as much. They've had 9 years. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time knowing that they were overfunded. And every district that was overfunded knows they were overfunded. And they just thought it was never going to stop. It has to be corrected. How about the districts that are giving tax abatements? Jersey City's a perfect example. They do pilots, and they cut the school district out. And they're not supporting them. They're not supporting the local districts. I told the League of Municipalities, I want to do a bill, and I want to work with them. I'm not against pilots. But whatever the portion the schools should be getting, what the portion of the tax bill should be, they should get that portion of the pilot if they're not supporting and funding their school districts.
I know there has been a bone of contention with some school districts, too, about the pilot program.
But fairness is what I'm saying is, like, if I'm a community that's paying my share, what I should be, the percentage that I should be paying to support my schools, then by all means, do whatever you want with your pilot. But if you're a district that's only funding by 20% or 22% and you're doing these big pilots and the money's not getting, the school's not getting any of it. I know Jersey City voluntarily is giving up 10%. That's a nice start, but I'm sorry, it's not good enough. If the portion should be 50% of the tax bill, if that's what it is, and I'm just making numbers up, but that should be what the school district gets out of the pilot. School district can't be cut out anymore in communities where they're not properly supporting their schools.
Okay, I want to thank you for spending time with communicating your thoughts to our members. Thank you.
Thanks,
again.
Thank
I will correct you on one thing. You didn't just start talking about school funding this year. I think you've been talking about this for a little bit longer than that. I'd like to thank Senate President Sweeney for joining us in this program, and I hope you enjoyed his insights.